It's my great pleasure to welcome James Corner, Field Operations.
Let me tell you, I am absolutely personally committed to this project. This is the kind of project I believe I was educated for and have trained and practiced for. It's the kind of project that is what our practice wants to do. Seattle is a wonderful city. It's a global city, and the whole possibility of bringing the city to the waterfront in a world-class and 21st century way is exactly what we want to do. So it's a hallmark of commitment that we're here this evening. This is a photograph of the city I was born in and lived in England, Manchester. I don't know how many of you know it, but it's not unlike Seattle. It's tough, it's real, it's working. It's typically shrouded in clouds and rainfall, like you guys are. So I'm accustomed to the weather. But not too far out of the city is the countryside, and that relationship of nature to city, urban to landscape, is very strong in Manchester, and as it is in Seattle. When I first came to the US in the late 1980s, I wanted to learn more about the American landscape and flew across the country with an aerial photographer colleague of mine. We took several trips across the country, photographing and trying to understand the American landscape, the big grid landscape of the Midwest, very quickly becoming the sort of irrigated landscape of the West, with the big pivot irrigators. These are the wonderful wheat field strips in Montana. And here you have eastern Washington with the big wheat fields of your state, which are just magnificent in terms of scale, magnitude, and grandeur. There's Mount Rainier sticking out of the clouds, and as you descend down the mountain, you come into the Puget Sound and then into Elliott's Bay. That is the frontage of Seattle. And here's the waterfront, but what strikes me as being very important is the fact that this is a working waterfront. It's tough. It's just like Manchester. It's just like the real world. I really hate waterfronts that are anesthetized and beautified to the point of looking like every other city. I think there are characteristics here to do with scale, working, manufacturing, the life of the port, the life of the ferries and the boats on the water that are really critical. Secondly, the fact that the city, to me, always feels like it's immersed in weather. The clouds, the mists, the fogs, these are really extraordinary phenomena. They play with light, they imbue a culture with a sense of place, and they surround the city, they immerse the city in this sort of ambient moodiness and melancholy of a very, very dynamic, big nature. This is a photograph looking from one of the streets across the bay, and it's not too far before you get to big nature, which is another characteristic of the Northwest and of Seattle. The fact that you guys have massive nature right on your front door, and you're a health and fitness culture, as well as an alternative culture. I love the fact that there's a very strong, and has been a very strong, youth culture in Seattle. A lot of energy, a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity. Thread is the new hot thing located in Seattle. And of course, that leads to a very vibrant street life, very vibrant neighborhoods, and more recently, a progressive sense of design and architecture with the Seattle Library and the Sculpture Park. And what a wonderful beginning with the Sculpture Park in terms of how the city can meet its waterfront in a new and fresh way. We call this Seattle's front porch. It's where the people of Seattle can have a new address, a new destination, a new frontage. The project, we could break it down very simply to say that there is the issue of it being a corridor, what this new green corridor could be, accommodating a new street, obviously lots of trees and plantings and water features and public spaces. The seawall that's being rebuilt does not have to be a dead straight wall. It can actually turn inland and outland and be modified to optimize opportunities for social interaction with the water. The piers are very distinctive. We want to find a way to activate their perimeters and to get people out on the piers and having a bigger sense of the bay. The little bays in between the piers offer a different sort of landscape from when you move out into the bigger bay. And of course, most important perhaps are the connections that lead you back into the downtown, and really are the connections and the links that connect the downtown to the waterfront, and how to give those a sense of civic scale, generosity, and movement, and celebrate something about the topographic issues of moving from one level to the other. And finally, the frontages. These buildings, which presently have very modest frontages or programs, could become much more animated. You could imagine these one day vibrant with cafes and restaurants and shops, and really helping to animate the economy of the waterfront.